In this demonstration, I'm going to do another portrait, but I'm going to combine all the steps into one fluid process. That painting on the left is from Jeremy Lipking, another great painter, another guy who uses just the sound foundations of art that I've taught you about so far to create extremely compelling pictures. Okay, so I start off with a textured background. I love to do this because just like with the sphere example, I like to push and pull light and shadow, kind of one process. I'm just getting in my basic drawing. Now, with the Sargent painting, I cheated and traced everything. This is the supplement for the tracing stage. I'm actually drawing it myself, okay? I'm just laying in some basic landmarks for where the eyes are, and then where the nose is right there. And I'm looking a little bit from reference at the painting just to speed up the process. And then where the mouth is. These are all just traditional landmarks that you can learn. And I'm blocking in the basic big shapes first. So first I'm concerned with kind of the overall mass, like where I'm going to put the head on the canvas. But then soon after that, I'm going to start breaking down my fence line between light and shadow. This face is a little different from the Sargent head. The Sargent head was lit kind of from the direct right. This one's lit from above. So my shapes are going to change. In this case, the eye sockets make very distinct shapes. And I actually want to take a quick time out to show you guys this. This is just some head reference material you can learn to really get better with your skills at drawing and painting the head. These things don't, you don't just magically know how planes change. You have to learn this stuff. And this is not a drawing class, but I want to recommend some drawing materials to help you. On the left is something called the Asaro head. You can find 3D models of this. You can also find physical sculptures of this. Like they sell casts in art stores. Though unfortunately, I haven't seen the physical models of them that much, but you can easily just Google it. Google the Asaro head and you can find it from all different angles. You notice on the left side of the head, it's more simple planes. On the right, it's more complex. And then on the right of that is Andrew Loomis's head handouts. There are more than just that one, but if you search for Andrew Loomis's planes of the head, you'll probably find a whole lot of handouts from one of his books, or you can probably find his book in an art store. I think it's called Drawing the Head. I'm not quite sure, but he details a whole lot of these planes, just different reference material for you. Okay, so I have that kind of knowledge in the back of my head as I'm painting this portrait. So I'm kind of looking at the shapes of light and shadow, the fence line between them, and then as I draw them on my canvas, I'm kind of cross-referencing them mentally with what I know is true about human anatomy, like the skull and the planes of the head and all that stuff, okay? So I've got some basic shapes coming in. The two eye sockets are there. The hair, how the hair frames the head, like the hair is a big dark shape over kind of a lighter shape of the average light of the head. That's coming into place. The neck and lower jaw is what I'm working on now. And you notice that that's kind of melted into one big shape. In edge language is kind of a lost edge there. And I'm kind of indicating that right now, indicating that there might be a lost edge there. Nothing is refined at this stage, of course. I'm laying everything in. But you notice what I'm doing. By working on that textured background, I'm essentially giving myself some clay, or the equivalent of clay, to work with. Some of that textured background will become halftone. Some of it might become average light. Some of it I'll carve away into shadow, but I'm giving myself some basic material to work into. So I don't really approach my own portraiture like I did in the previous demonstration where I compartmentalize everything. I was showing you that to prove to you guys that you can compartmentalize it, and I actually highly recommend you do if you're not a whole lot of experience yet. But when I paint portraits now, because I've painted hundreds or maybe thousands of them, I do combine these stages into a more fluid process where I am kind of tackling maybe 2 or 3 decisions at once. I'll be tackling a shape decision, like is it average light or average shadow? I'll tackle that. I'll also tackle the C-curve, S-curve straight thing. How am I designing that shape? And then maybe I'll hint at its edge. All of these things can, of course, be refined as you go. That's the beauty of digital painting or opaque painting in general. You can refine all your decisions, but I'm just showing you how I actually go about it. Okay, so just refining. At this stage, I've got a pretty good block in. This is what I would call this. I'd call this a block in. It's got the shapes first and foremost kind of decided upon. And then from here, I can start focusing on some slightly smaller shapes. As you see, what I'm doing now is I'm actually realizing I need more value, a lighter value, to achieve the average light of her forehead. A lot of average light there. There is a bit of a highlight on her forehead, but I have not painted that yet. What I'm doing now is average light. Now I'm back in the shadow of the hair. Notice how the hair bleeds into the eye socket. That shape is combined. Remember last week I said whenever you can melt shapes together, it increases the strength of the shape. Larger shapes just read faster. That's all that I can say about it. So whenever I can make a bigger shape, I'm going to do it. And I love portrait painters who are clever about that. Like they combine things together, like the hair into the eye socket. I love doing that stuff. That's why I paint, is to try and figure out the best way to arrange this puzzle. Working on the shape of the nose. Here's the edge where the tip of those shapes. How does that shadow of the nose meet the average light? Same kind of thing with the cheeks. It's going to be difficult for me to tell you at every stage exactly what I'm doing because I do 3 things at once. Okay, that's the kind of the point of this demonstration. This demonstration is more visual than auditory, whereas the previous demonstration was probably more auditory than visual. Watching a painter combine all these steps together is kind of a useless thing to watch if that's all you're watching. But at this stage, because I've shown you what's actually going on in my head, I'm hoping you can appreciate the different kinds of decisions that are being made here. I'm not doing anything more advanced than what I've already talked about in this lecture. I'm just combining them together. That in itself is more advanced. I certainly could not do this on my first year of painting. My first few years of painting, I could not do this. It would be too much. It would overload my brain. But because I've done so many studies, I've kind of done my homework. I find a lot of joy in this process of combining everything. It's just fun. It feels like sculpting or something, where I'm just constantly pushing and pulling and defining shapes and losing shapes and getting shapes back and all this kind of fun stuff that is, the reason why we're all here, right? We're all here to have fun. This is why we got into art in the first place. And I think that, when you can get to a stage of combining the fundamentals together, art really becomes fun. So, there's a nice bit of halftone underneath the brows, right where the bridge of the nose is, a keystone shape of halftone. Laying in some highlights here. My first foray into the highlights. You notice I'm trying to watch their edge. I don't want anything to be super hard-edged because in the Lipking painting on the left, he doesn't really have hard-edged highlights. And because this is a copy of his, I'm trying to adhere to it as much as I can. This painting in real time took about 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, which is pretty fast. But it's because, it's values only, so I don't have to deal with color. So that saves a whole lot of time. And then, combining these stages, another benefit of that is you actually get to work a whole lot quicker. Because, when you can make 3 decisions at the same time, you all of a sudden have saved, the time it would have taken you to make 3 decisions separately, right? So here's some dark accents where the eyes are, just like in the N.C. Wyeth painting earlier when I showed you those dark accents for the character's eyes. This portrait of a woman has the same kind of thing. Her eyes are completely in shadow, except for actually her upper lid catches some average light, which I'm painting right now. But other than that, everything is in shadow. So the iris will be a dark accent when that's the case. Just refining the eye socket shape, bit of average light where the eye socket turns up to meet the brow. That's always a nice halftone shape. So I'm, managing that transition. Going back to just moving the hair shape around, I'm, always honing in on the final. No matter what process I use, the previous one or this one, the general theme of it is you work from big to small, getting the general stuff stated first, the biggest stuff, the biggest shapes, and then you work into them and find your smaller shapes. So, tweaking exactly how that neck is shaped. It's not quite correct yet. I'll probably go back to it. How the jaw curves, where it curves, all that kind of stuff that, you can't realistically do right off the top. Working the edge where that eye socket shadow changes into average light. And, edge work is still very important. It's something I do right up to the end. Usually I'll get my shapes correct first. Even in this process, I'll usually arrive at correct shapes first, because for me that's a little easier. Then the edge I can begin to evaluate from there. In other words, I kind of need my shapes to be correct before I can evaluate whether my edges are correct. because again, the shapes do the heavy lifting, right? You need those to work. So there's a lot of push and pull to find them. And then once I do have them, I lock on and I kind of commit to them with my edges. And this is fun. You know, I had a lot of fun recording this demo for you guys. And this is the kind of thing I would do in life drawing sessions every week. I would, back when I lived near a studio, I would go life drawing maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Actually, not life drawing, life painting, where the model would pose for 2 to 3 hours. And I have hundreds of paintings in my basement of this exact kind of thing. Although they're oil paintings, they're traditional paintings on canvas, but this exact process where I would just do this over and over and over, and that's how I learned how to paint. Okay, so just because I'm showing you the steps here, it's not going to supplement your own practice. You need to, if you haven't put in the hours, you need to do that. And if any of these principles are new to you, which I expect some of them will be, I mean, that's why you're taking this class, right? You will need hours. It's not going to happen in 8 weeks. It's going to take potentially years, but I've given you the tools. You know, rewatch this video as many times as you need to really solidify those in your own mind, and then put them to practice. Okay, put them to practice. And I'll do my best to guide you with your assignments as to the particular area of focus that you need to apply to your work. Because everyone's going to be coming at it from a different stage, different level of experience, different level of expertise. And ironically, I'm kind of running out of things to say here, because this is all just refinement, just honing in on those shapes, honing in. You know, in the Sargent one, I had them traced, so I knew I had them perfectly exact to the Sargent. But in this one, because I'm drawing it freehand, I'm always going back just for little tweaks. You notice right now, though, I'm not making overhauls here. I'm just tweaking little bits of C curves, S curves, and straights, trying to maximize my design. I think that's a good way of thinking about it. As you progress in your piece, what you should be doing is maximizing the design, not redesigning. If I needed to do a redesign, I hope I would have caught that earlier. Okay, it kind of hurts a little bit when you have to blow away half the face because you didn't design it properly. Now that will happen. I remember doing an oil painting once, and I was like 6 hours in, and I scraped off half the face because I had elongated the nose too much. That stuff will happen, but I'm very diligent now of making sure that doesn't happen, just by evaluating each step. You know, using the same kind of evaluation I showed you earlier with the Sean Galloway piece versus the Sargent piece, that kind of stuff. Evaluating my shapes, making sure they're correct. And if you're working from reference, that's actually very easy, because you have the reference to compare to. You can say, is my shape like the reference? When you're painting from your imagination, you have to invent all this, and it becomes a little harder because you have no reference to adhere to. But in this case, all you got to do, you kind of have the answers at the back of the book here. You can just look at it. So I'm zooming in a little bit, and I just want to show you, look at the eyes, the eye sockets. I want to put what I call detail. Now, when I say detail, I am not painting eyelashes. Okay, I don't care about that. That is pedantic stuff. You don't need that. I want to be clever and not paint eyelashes, but detail for me is just the smallest of the small shapes. Look at that little piece of highlight on her left eye that just catches a little bit of light. That's detail to me. Just a very small shape that I needed to zoom in to help me see. These subtle edge shifts from firm of the eyebrow to soft of the little like fatty pad just below the eyebrow. That kind of thing to me is detail. Just these subtle, nuanced relationships of shape and edge. I call that detail. Okay. And, you know, enough of that kind of detail, enough of that kind of focused thought in your piece, it will look very believable. And you do not need to paint eyelashes. Okay. Just trying to get the planes to turn around the eyeball, because those planes are little islands of light inside the shadow. And after that, I'll call this finished. So here is the finished study. Now, it isn't completely perfect. You'll notice the Lipking painting, she has a slightly more cheery kind of demeanor than mine. Mine looks a little more sullen. That's just because I spent 40 minutes on this instead of 3 hours. If I'd spent 3 hours, I could have certainly arrived at an exact copy, but that's okay. I don't care so much about exact likeness. It's just the form and the light and the practice of shapes and edge that I'm concerned about. So if you were doing a study like this, please don't worry about likeness so much. Your goal should be to bolster your foundation of shapes and values and edges.